In the Second World War, victory often came down to who was fastest. You needed speed, you needed intel, and you absolutely needed the right tools for the job. So, this is the incredible story of how the US Army, who was, believe it or not, caught completely flat footed, had to scramble to build an entire fleet of armored cars, basically from nothing. Let's dive right in.
Okay, so take a look at this. This is the M8 Greyhound. And by 1944, the last big year of the war in Europe, these things were everywhere. They were the eyes and ears of the American army, just zipping all over France and pushing into Germany. Really, it was the perfect symbol of American industrial might. Fast, effective, and mass-produced.
But, and this is a huge but, that whole picture of dominance, it's kind of misleading. Because if you just rewind the clock a few years, right before the world really went up in flames, the US military had, well, they had nothing. Zilch. No modern armored cars. They'd basically given up on the whole idea. I mean, nothing in the arsenal, no blueprints, no real experience. They were starting from absolute zero. So, that's the big question, right? How on earth did an army with no modern armored cars suddenly pull one of the most iconic vehicles of the war out of a hat in just a few short years? Well, it's a heck of a story, full of forgotten warnings, some pretty frantic experiments, and a little bit of battlefield genius. All right, to really get why this was such a mad dash, you first have to understand just how badly the US military had ignored these vehicles. For decades, the armored car was basically the forgotten child of the army. And this timeline, man, it just lays it all out. After World War I, boom, development stops, budget cuts. Then you get this tiny little spark of interest in 28, but it fizzles out. And by 1937, they officially just dropped the whole thing. The thinking was, hey, we've got tanks and half-tracks, what do we need these for? It literally wasn't until 1940, when they saw what the British were doing with their armored cars out in the deserts of North Africa, that the alarm bells finally started screaming in Washington. And here's the craziest part. It's not like nobody saw this coming. Way back in 1932, a guy you might have heard of, General Douglas MacArthur, spelled it out clear as day. He said, hey, right after the tank, the armored car is the most important thing we need. He totally got the need for fast, light recon vehicles, but his advice just fell on deaf ears. A decision that, would turn out to be a really big mistake. Okay, so fast forward a bit. The war in Europe is kicking off, and the U.S. Ordnance Department goes into full-blown panic mode. What happens next is this just chaotic, desperate scramble. It was a total alphabet soup of prototypes, with all these different companies rushing to try and fill this massive gap. So let's look at a couple of the early attempts in the medium class. On your left, you've got Ford's T17 Deerhound. The U.S. Army took one look and said, nope, too big, too heavy. But then on the right, you've got Chevy's T17E1. The US still wasn't interested, but the British, they absolutely loved it. They called it the Staghound, and it served them really well. It just goes to show you, nobody could even agree on what an armored car was supposed to be. Then you had some designers who just went with the bigger is always better idea. And wow, check out this beast. This is the T18E2 Boarhound. I mean, this thing was a monster. We're talking over 18 tons empty with a big all 57mm cannon. It was built for one thing, fighting in the wide-open deserts of North Africa. A real heavyweight champion. There was just one teensy little problem. By the time the 30 Boarhounds actually got delivered to the British, the North African campaign was over. Yup, they had built the absolute perfect vehicle for the Desert War right as the Desert War ended. So now you've got this incredible machine that's a solution to a problem that doesn't exist anymore. And for the tight, narrow roads of Europe, way, way too big. So, with all these heavy designs turning out to be dead ends, it was time for a major rethink. Everybody had to go back to the drawing board. The Army finally realized what it actually needed wasn't some kind of wheeled tank. No, they needed a light, fast, nimble scout. And that huge shift in thinking? Well, it paved the way for the vehicle that would become the absolute definition of American recon. So after putting a bunch of different light prototypes through their pieces, one design really stood out from the pack. It was Ford's T-22. It had a 6x6 drive, a nice low profile, a decent 37mm gun. It was pretty much exactly what the Armored Force Board was looking for at this point. A really great start for sure, but it wasn't quite ready for prime time. And this is where things get really smart. The guys who were actually going to have to fight in these things, the soldiers,
They had some notes. They demanded changes. They were like, we need to see better. So the simple little vision slits got swapped out for protectoscopes. Think of them like armored periscopes that let the driver see out without getting his head shot off. They got rid of a machine gun in the hull that was kind of pointless. They added sand shields you could take on and off, and armored boxes to keep gear and the radio safe. You can literally see the design evolving based on what the troops actually needed. So, with all those crucial changes made, the vehicle was officially approved in May 1942. It was now the light armored car M8. It was actually the British who got a ton of them through Lend-Lease that gave it that legendary nickname, the Greyhound. I mean, what a perfect name for a machine built for speed, right? The hero was finally ready to roll off the production line.
Okay, so we've gone from the drawing board to the factory, but now for the real test, the battlefield. Let's see how the M8 actually did when the bullets started flying. How did this vehicle, that was kind of rushed into existence, actually handle the brutal reality of war? 25 yards. Just let that sink in. That's, what, less than the length of a swimming pool? It's ridiculously close. Now, picture a German Tiger tank, one of the most terrifying things on any battlefield in World War II, at that distance.
This just proves that on-paper stats aren't everything. During the Battle of the Bulge, a single M8 Greyhound managed to ambush a Tiger tank. It got suicidally close, swung around to the Tiger's much weaker rear armor, and just pumped 3 37mm rounds into it. And it worked. The behemoth caught fire. I mean, talk about a classic David versus Goliath story. And you know, the basic M8 frame was so good, it was also super versatile. So Ford did something really clever. They just took the turd off, slapped on a machine gun ring, and boom, you've got the M20 utility car. It was a brilliant, simple change. It served as a command car, a troop carrier, a cargo truck, you name it. It just proved how solid the original design really was. But okay, let's be real here. The Greyhound was far from perfect. It wasn't a super weapon. For one, its armor was paper thin. It couldn't stop much more than small arms fire. And its belly? Completely unarmored. That made it absolutely terrifyingly vulnerable to landmines. The crews learned pretty fast to pile sandbags on the floor, just hoping it would give them a little extra protection. And yeah, it was super fast on roads, but a lot of guys complained that its off-road performance was, well, not great. Now, the story of the M8 doesn't just stop in 1945. Not at all. It had a really long life after the war. But the future, for armored cars in the US military specifically, well, that took a really, really strange turn. And you gotta understand, these American designs had a huge impact all over the world. The British Staghound you see on the left, it served for ages. And that's a French M8 Greyhound on the right, still kicking well into the Cold War. We're talking dozens of countries all over the globe, from South America to Asia, were using these vehicles for decades. That's a real testament to just how reliable and effective they were. And America even designed the perfect successor. This right here is the M38 Wolfhound. It was better in pretty much every way. Better suspension, way better off-road, and improved armor. It was probably one of the best armored car designs of the entire war. But with the end of the war in sight, its production contract was just canceled. The golden age of the American armored car was over. Right at the moment, it had reached its peak. And all of this leaves us with one last really fascinating question to chew on. After that frantic scramble to catch up from nothing, after creating these legendary vehicles like the Greyhound and the Staghound that other countries used for decades, why did the US Army just drop the whole idea of the armored car again after the war? It's a wild turn of events, and it really makes you think about how military priorities and ideas about warfare are always changing.